So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Entrepreneurial Lunch and Learn offered by the Lawrence and Phil Center for Entrepreneurship at Baruch College. I'm Gary Smalls, the program coordinator of the Phil Center. The Phil Center for Entrepreneurship is a multifaceted division here at Baruch College, offering free services and programs for the entrepreneur community. Today's Lunch and Learn webinar is presented by Latisha Daring. Latisha is an entrepreneur and founder of the Brooklyn-based restaurant Greedy Vegan. Greedy Vegan's mission is to provide delicious and nutritious vegan comfort food to the community. Since its inception in 2018, Latisha has been able to open 2 locations in Brooklyn and has had her story covered by multiple media outlets, including Black enterprises. Overall, Latisha wants to make sure that the residents of the community she serves has a healthy relationship with food and are aware of the impact that food has on their well-being. Thank you for being with us, Latisha. Please feel free to tell our audience a little bit about yourself before you start your presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Gary, for that amazing introduction and for having me. It is my honor and pleasure to be able to share my experiences and my story with you all today, and obviously being able to just converse, answer questions, as well as help you unpack some things that you may be wondering about in your own personal entrepreneurial journey. My name is Latisha Daring. I am what you call a serial entrepreneur. I am the owner of Greedy Vegan, which is a vegan comfort food restaurant located in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I've owned and operated that restaurant for 6 years this April 15th, which I'm very excited about. I am not a formally trained chef. I am actually someone who is deeply connected to my community, and really I see it as a gift to be able to have the vision to recognize challenges in our community and come up with strategies in which to solve them. And for me, food insecurity, as well as just overall nutrition and health as it relates to our community, is a huge problem. And accessibility to healthy food is also a challenge in our community. And I sought out to fulfill that need. And that is how Greedy Vegan was born. I have a very small staff of 6, and we operate the restaurant on Tompkins Avenue between Gates and Monroe Avenue. We have a full service restaurant, takeout. We offer catering. We also have a beautiful patio garden backyard that will be opening this April. So we're really excited about our footprint in the community, but we're even more excited about the lives that we're able to change and the dialogue that we're able to have across generations, just about healthy food and our bodies and how we feel and what we can do to heal ourselves.
Awesome. So the floor is yours. You can start the story from your journey, and as it was titled, Fashion, Food, and Fresh Starts, and just giving our audience a little trip down how you went from fashion to food to fresh starts.
All right, y'all ready for this? Because this is a lot. I am what you call not only a serial entrepreneur, but I am a pivoter. And when I say pivot is a very important action word in my life, because I am born and raised in Brooklyn. I grew up very poor, grew up during a very tough time, during the time where crack had really impacted our community. And I grew up in a single parent household. And so for me, I've always been a dreamer. I've always seen things different than other people because I always wanted to make sure that whatever life I had, it would be better than what I was living, right? And so I was very inspired by fashion when from a very young age. I always wanted to be a model. And so I would watch these fashion shows with my mom on TV and get all into them. And, she was able to once in a while buy me fashion magazines and things like that. And it really designed a map per se of what it was that I wanted to do. And modeling didn't work out for me because I am a shapely woman. And I then decided, you know what? I will figure it out, right? And so I went into retail. I was recruited at a very young age to work at Gap. I started with Gap from the foundation of the company when Gap was like selling Levi's. A lot of people don't remember that, but that was really the foundation of the Gap and the original owners of the Gap. And so I took a lot of lessons from that experience, built a great career in retail, and then moved on to opening all the Old Navies in New York as a manager, and learned a lot there as well. And then got to a point in my career where I was just like, okay, this has been great. Went from managing and merchandising to doing window displays, and to buying, consulting with the buyers, as well as planning to make sure that we had the right quantity of product to sell to achieve the numbers that we had to. And so I kind of did a lot in that over those years and learned a lot. But one of the things that stuck with me the most was you're not in a position to impact change with your customer. You're not in a position where if a customer gives you feedback, you're not able to react. You have to go through all of these layers of management in order to get an answer to their problem. And it's not fast enough. And so after working in retail for 20 plus years, I decided that I wanted to do something else. And so that kind of led to a series of different things, but mainly my own retail store. I opened a retail store of my own back in 2000 on Vanderbilt Avenue in Park Place. The space was previously Maddie Rich's place that's affiliated with the movie Crooklyn, if you guys remember Crooklyn. It was a corner location, and I had started building a clientele by selling things out of the back of my car. I would literally beg my friends to invite a bunch of their girlfriends over to their homes, and I would set their living room up like a retail store. And that's how I really got started. After doing that, building clientele and doing that for a couple of months, I had enough experience with what people liked that I was picking, but also I had somewhat of a clientele, and I decided to open a retail store. I opened that store in 2000, and it was an incredible, incredible experience. I mean, we had celebrities shopping at our store, from Mos Def to Rosie Perez. Andre Leon Talley came to my store and spent a whole afternoon with me, and took me to lunch and wrote a whole page about how well curated our store was in Vogue magazine, which, you guys, being a little girl who emulated fashion, and all of these individuals that were the gatekeepers, to have this man recognize this little girl from Brooklyn was huge for me. And it was a true confirmation that what I was doing was full of purpose, right? That I was this girl that I thought I had great fashion sense, and I lived in a borough that only showed us urban, right? Only showed us, jeans and t-shirts. And when we wanted to get dressed up, we had to get on the train and go to the city to go shopping. And to me, that wasn't right. I felt like Brooklyn had the best style. We had the best curators of style. We had the best taste level. And why did we have to go to Manhattan to go shopping? And so that was the first business that I started that served a purpose, served a problem, right? I wanted to bring unique things from all over the world into this little hub in Brooklyn and allow people to really find their sense of identity through fashion in their own borough without having to travel. And it was so amazing, being able to even help people with their self-esteem, their body image, their confidence levels, watching them give birth and then grow through that where they can fit into things or not fit into things and carry plus sizes. And there was just so much in that experience that was incredible for me. And one of the reasons why we stopped is we closed 10 years later. We had it for 10 years. And unfortunately, gentrification in Brooklyn leads to a lot of closures of small businesses. And where my business was is now Restaurant Row in Brooklyn on Vanderbilt Avenue. And so, and in my space is actually a Kumon tutoring space now. But that moment of time in Brooklyn for me was essential because it set the bar for how big I could dream and what I could accomplish. Whether I had the experience or not, it was more about the drive, the ambition, and the vision, right? And being able to pull all the pieces together and not be afraid that I didn't have all the answers, but to really charge forward in knowing that the answers would come through trial and error, through experience, and I would keep pushing forward. So it was sad. We closed in 2010. And it was probably one of the lowest points of my life because I was like, oh my God, like I accomplished so much. And now, and I never imagined not having it. So now what do I do? Right. And I took a year to just reflect, and I had to go back to work because I, at that point, had a baby girl. And I needed to make sure that I could provide and sustain, right? And so I went back to retail, which was really hard. And it wasn't because I had been my own boss, but it was really hard because the landscape of retail had changed and people didn't necessarily respect the experience that I had previously. Instead, they saw me as a threat. They saw me as this boisterous Black woman who thinks she knows it all. And that really wasn't my disposition. I was really ready to once again learn, right? What is this experience going to teach me that I can now take into the next step? So I worked for about a year. I'm sorry, I worked for about 5 years. And I traveled during that time. I went to about 26 countries and really experienced culture and life elsewhere while I was working. And when I got to a point of my last position in retail was working for a company called Rag and Bone, which was a luxury denim company owned by two British men. And it was amazing. The brand was amazing. The style was amazing. I really enjoyed working for them. It resonated with a lot of things that I held dear in terms of personal style. But I got to a point where I was bored. I was staring at the walls, like, what are we doing? And I wasn't personally fulfilled. And so I took all of the experiences that I had traveling and really absorbing culture through food, and always having an affinity and love for food. And I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time to change. Maybe it's time to pivot and do something that serves a little bit, a much bigger purpose from the interior instead of the exterior. And so that is really how my journey with food began. I did a pop-up at a friend's bar here in Brooklyn called Ode to Bobble. And I couldn't believe it because I was just kind of playing around and people went crazy. And I was like, oh, this might be something. And so as people were leaving the pop-up, they were like, oh my God, make sure you stay in touch. Tell us when you're going to open. And I was like, open what? Like I hadn't even gotten that far in the thought process. But it really put a battery in my back that the need for flavorful, texture, cultural, vegan food needed a space in Brooklyn. And this is back in 2018, when there really were not a lot of vegan restaurants, especially in Brooklyn. We used to have ITIL spots when I was growing up, and that was all of the places where the Rastas hung out. And it was all, Rastafarian food, which is food that you grow from the land, and you cultivate that and you make that however you wish, in a flavorful way. And that food was amazing and great. But I really wanted to tie culture together. I wanted to take the fact that Brooklyn has so much Caribbean influence. And then here I am, a little girl that grew up in Brooklyn, but my family is from the South. And how do I marry those two cultures in a menu in a vegan way? I thought it was extremely interesting. I thought it would resonate with a lot of different individuals, and then bring us together where we can actually talk about food and accessibility and health and nutrition. And now I'm serving a purpose that is not only about how we look, but about how we feel and how we're taking care of one another, and how our lifespan can be extended by the choices that we make. And so that is really kind of how Greedy Vegan was born. I started to look at spaces, no money. Let me make sure I put that out there. When I started my clothing store, I started with $11,000 that I had in my 401k, and turned that into a business. When I started this restaurant, I really didn't have any money. Yes, I worked full time, but that was the only money that I had, to really put into this business. I didn't really have a clear business plan either, because again, I'm not a formally trained chef. I had never worked in a restaurant. I literally applied all of the principles from working in fashion and being a manager, to this restaurant idea, because that's what it really started out to be, was an idea. I started looking for spaces. I contacted this broker. She was amazing because I was playing around. I wasn't 100% sure or confident that I wanted a space, but something that she did that kind of pushed me was, for the first time, I'd never had an experience like this with a broker. She called me and she said, tell me what you're really looking for. Tell me what is the most important things to you. And when she started talking to me in that way, that's when the business plan started to come together. And it was so life altering for me in that moment, because it was literally just coming off of my brain and just coming out of my mouth. And these are things that, like, I didn't give a whole lot of thought to prior to. It just felt natural and it just flowed. And so when I got off the phone with her, I was like, that was weird. Like, I'd never experienced anything like that. The next day she called me. She said, I think I have your space. And I was like, okay. And so she took me to this space, and when she let the gate up, I was like, oh my God, this is it. It was a tiny 300 square foot space, that had never been a restaurant. It was literally a converted garage, on Bergen between Notion and Rogers. And she was like, this is a perfect space for you to start. It's not an enormous amount of rent, and you can build your business from here. And that's where Greedy Vegan started. And I looked up one day and there were so many people squeezing into the space that I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I mean, I fed the chef from ABCV my second week open. I fed Yolanda Adams, and so many different people, RZA, out of that space. It was just incredible. And so we grew the idea and the concept from there. I hired some talent that had previous experiences that would support and help Greedy grow. Those people through the journey of Greedy are priceless. But that's really how I kind of got to where I am now. And the food industry is no joke. It is hard physical labor, mentally exhausting. But if you really understand the purpose behind food and why many chefs do it, it's a love. It's a deep, deep rooted passion and love in serving, right? And for me, any business I've ever had has been about serving my community, has been about how do we elevate our community. It's super important to me. And it really always serves as the foundation to any business that I build. So that is literally my journey.
Awesome. So good. So good. And I know whenever we're telling our story, there's so much that we leave out because we have to respect the brevity of time, right? So I know there's so much more to that story. So being that we are at this point, we can actually start the Q&A early. So we'll start the Q&A now. I already have some questions queued up. Had some questions got emailed to me this morning, so we got plenty of questions.
Okay,
So
I like it.
so we got plenty of questions. We have no lack of questions. So the first questions is the one thing I've noticed with working with our students who are on their entrepreneurial journey and also interacting with some of my fellow aspiring entrepreneurs is sometimes the biggest deterrent to starting their business is a lack of skills or resources.
Mm.
And when I hear your story, I hear someone who is not a formally trained chef, and I hear the story of someone who didn't always have the money. So can you describe your process of going into business ideas from a mental perspective and a belief perspective that gives you the confidence that you can do these things even though the resources aren't there?
Right. Well, if you really rely on the resources, you'll never jump out and do it. You won't, because it's one of the hardest things to obtain, to be brutally honest. I think, your passion and your drive and your idea have to really push you. And if you believe in yourself enough, there are things that will naturally come to you. Your perspective changes, right? When you're extremely passionate about something, you may sacrifice, right? And for me, that's what it was about. I sacrificed. I worked a full-time job the first 8 months that Greedy was open. So I would get up at 5 a.m. I would head to the market and be there when they opened at 6 a.m. with my whatever money I could skim off of my paycheck to go and buy groceries for the restaurant. And I would get into the restaurant and I would cook from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. We would open at 12. I hired my very first employee, paid him, I think, $16 an hour when he started. And I would make sure that all the food was cooked, and then he would come in to serve, and I would drive to work. I was late every day, driving to work to get there on time. But I made sure that my business was okay. And I did that for 8 months and I was exhausted. But that was my level of sacrifice because I believed in my dream. I believed that if I were able to sacrifice this, then the blessings and the resources would come. And they did. The customers came and the support came and the money flowed, and I was able to quit my job and pursue my business full time. And so I don't think that, I mean, the world has changed, right? I started Greedy in 2018. It's 2024. When I started my clothing store, it was 2000, right? And money was different. The economy was different. And I think that obviously plays a big role in how you move, right? There's technology now. Technology wasn't such a thing back then for either businesses, right? I've kind of grown through all of these things. And would I do anything differently? I definitely would. I think I was always afraid to use other people's money. I always wanted to be the first investor in myself. I always wanted to be the first investor in my vision because I could not understand how to convince anyone else of my vision and my dream if I didn't invest in myself. And so for me, that's always been how I led, is to invest in myself. Over the years, I definitely have had investors, absolutely. But I will tell you something about investments. You really have to find the right fit. Whoever invests in your business really has to understand your business and be willing to stick with you when things are great and when things are not, because no business does not have ups and downs. And you don't want to have an investor who's expecting everything to be rainbows and lollipops and then be disappointed and discouraging to you on your journey, in your effort to sustain and build it up. And so you really want to surround yourself with people that have just as much confidence in your idea and your concept as you do, because it takes a lot of endurance to be an entrepreneur. Because again, it's not always great. It's not always up. And when it's low, and when things are not happening, when the money isn't coming in, you really have to be able to persevere. And that takes an enormous amount of strength, mental strength, spiritual strength. And you want to make sure that the people that are around you are helping keep you strong, right? They're building you up, they support you, they believe in you, they're speaking life into your vision and into your dream. Because if you're low and you're surrounded by people who are not speaking that way into your vision or your dream, how do you persevere? How do you pick yourself up? How do you keep going? How do you find the strength? And so, for me, my initial investment in my business was myself. Um, and then obviously making sure that I can find ways in which to yield greater profit, that I then reinvested into the business. I only had one employee for the first year of the business. And I was scared to do that, but I had to because I was still working. And so I had to entrust someone that believed in my idea, that lived in the community and really wanted to see this concept flourish. And to this day, he's still an amazing friend. And I always call him when he comes to see me, because he still comes to eat at Greedy. I say, yo, I introduce him to everybody. I'm like, this is my first employee, because I'm so proud of the fact that I can clearly identify who helped me build my vision.
This is so good. So such a phenomenal response, because it speaks to everything and everything that we're trying to communicate to our community, right? These are real stories where not everyone is going to have this greatest idea that they're going to get $100,000 investment. Sometimes that initial investment is you going to work, right?
Absolutely.
And not being afraid to go to work,
Mhm.
right? To be able to
Absolutely.
fund your business, right?
Mhm.
This is your dream. And you said something else, something so important, where you wanted to make sure that in order for investors to believe in you, they had to see that you believed in you. And the best way to show that you believe in you is by putting your money into it. As they would say, having skin in the game, right?
Mhm.
These questions are jumping all over the place. All right, so we have, how do you overcome your own mental blocks to
Mhm.
move to the next level of your business and brand? Second part to the question is, has there been a particular moment that truly validated your success? Mm,
That is a great question.
mm.
I will say mental blocks happen every day, every single day. I will say whew, you have things that you can't control. Like, I'm in the food industry, right? We all know what's going on in the economy right now. Prices fluctuate. I have no control over them. My customer may not even understand why I can't have a certain item on the menu today because it has tripled in price. Or my body is tired, like physically, right? So, but I still have to show up and still have to give 100% every single day. And I think it's really about, I mean, my spirituality is everything for me personally, because I know that all of the success that I've had in my life, all of the stories that I can sit here and tell are nothing but blessings, right? They're nothing but God's hand in my life and orchestrating all of the things. So I know that personally. And for me, mental blocks are noise, right? It's usually challenges in life that you can't control, that you give into and allow it to debilitate you, or it's or it's you know trying to be in control of something that you actually have no control over. And I'm learning that now at 50. I'm going to tell you guys, 3 4 businesses in, 6 years in this business, every day I am a student. And I think that is pivotal, because you have to be open to understanding what the lessons are to get through your mental blocks, because a lot of times we put them on ourselves, and we limit ourselves because of it. And so I sit still sometimes, and really self reflect like, okay, Latisha, you allowed yourself to spiral, which didn't solve anything because you're still dealing with the same situation. So, how can you actually impact what's happening? And the only way you can sometimes is to sit still, pray. I pray often, and ask for guidance often. I'll give you guys just a brief story as it relates to that question. Well, two things. 2023 was probably the worst year of my life in my business journey. I am getting a divorce, which Gary knows, after being in a relationship for 27 years. And my dad died, and I'm an only child, literally months after. And so on top of business challenges, on top of turnover of staff, on top of limited and lacking resources, and I became very depressed. But I couldn't sit in it for a long period of time, because sitting in it for a long period of time would have cost me everything, and allowed my circumstances to define who I was. And I didn't work this hard to allow that to happen. And so I had to pick myself up. I had to pray real hard for strength, and I had to tackle each day, as best I could with all that I had. And I can now say, even though I'm still grieving in a lot of ways, I still show up. Right. I still show up for my business. I still show up for my community. And my business is still here. And that for me showed me how much strength I actually have, and how much mental capacity I actually can build in just letting things happen, but also taking control of things that you can control, which is yourself. I hope I answered that question.
That hit the heart. And I'm gonna get to the second part to that question. I just want to first thank you for, that was something I knew, but I was like, I'll let you decide if you want to share that. But I think for the space, that is such a potent statement and share, because on our journeys, whether for the students on this call, like there's things that's gonna happen that you can't control while you're on this journey of accomplishing a specific goal. For many of our students, it's being the first person in your family to get your degree. For some
Mm,
other students, it is getting that business off the ground and life is still happening. And I think the one thing we can't teach in school is resilience and perseverance. They are learned skills, they are learned traits. And by you being forthright about your story, I feel very confident that the listeners were blessed by that, because things will happen on your journey, but it's a matter of how you're going to respond and what is your foundation. So I appreciate you for that. The second part of the question was, and this is more light, has there
yes.
been a particular moment that truly validated your success?
Yeah, I think I shared it earlier. Well, there was two. There was two. And they all happened in the very first space of Greedy, which is 1031 Bergen Street. The day that I looked up and my space was rammed with people. I mean, to the point where there was no room and they were still trying to squeeze in. It was crazy. I was just like, what's happening? Because it just happened, right? And I had to I had to hold myself, because I literally was gonna cry. I'm very emotional. I'm a Cancer. And so I was gonna cry. And I was just like, no, Latisha, you don't even have time for that. You got to keep going. And guys, I have a burn. I have this tattoo on my arm that says faith. And I have a burn, that I got after I got this tattoo. And it was from that day, because I was moving so fast and trying to help so many people. I had a pot of hot kale on the stove, and I grabbed it with a spoon and did it so fast that the hot kale hit my arm and burned me. And that was one of my big burns in the kitchen, because I have a lot of them. But that moment was everything for me, because it was the moment that I had prayed for. You know, my space was so tiny and so quaint and so special. And I was literally serving people while I was cooking. It was like the best experience. And to have a moment where everyone was dying to taste my food, not being formally trained, was incredible for me. And so there was that moment. And the moment that Yolanda Adams walked into that same space was everything for me, because for whatever reason, she came in, she had sunglasses on. I knew it was her. It was so crazy. And we were busy. And nobody else recognized her. But again, I'm spiritual, so I know who Miss Yolanda Adams is. And literally, when she came in, I was shaking. And it's not about her celebrity, because that's great, right? But it wasn't about her celebrity. It was about the anointing of her, right? And, you know, that's a different level of spirituality, but she's a very anointed woman. And for her to walk in my building, I was like, oh, this is confirmation. This is God's way of showing me that he loves me and that I am living in my purpose. And that is one of the main reasons why I keep pushing so hard. I mean, she did a whole post about me. She posted 3 times about the restaurant. I mean, this woman, that was like a defining moment for me. So those two are the most like pivotal moments in the history of Greedy.
And how you tell the story is confirmation that it's the moment. Because as I'm watching you tell the story and you're there, like you're
Yes,
there. Like I see the bubble.
yes.
I can see the bubble. Like you're there. Right? As you, it's vivid. It's very clear. And for those who don't know, Yolanda Adams is a successful. She's been in the industry, recording industry for a really long time. Her genre is gospel, but she's
Mhm.
been in the field for a really long time and respected by many. So that to give you guys context for those who may have not known
Yes.
who Yolanda
If
Adams
you heard her
is.
voice, you would know.
Beautiful, beautiful voice. Beautiful voice. Next question.
Yes.
um, what do you rely on, or who do you rely on when you have questions on being a chef or a restaurant owner during the first year? That's a great question.
Mm. Um, I had a couple of resources. I have a very good friend. His name is Wayne. He owned and still does own a very popular Caribbean restaurant on Nostrand Avenue. He's been a restaurateur for as long as I've known him. He was one of my customers when I had my clothing store. So we have a very strong bond, him and his girlfriend. I am the godmother to his son as well. And so I relied on him because I had no idea of even equipment. Like I had him walk through my space. He helped me find employees when I was able to hire more people. He gave me great advice. He's also spiritual. And so I would say Wayne was probably my first resource. And then after that, I would say over the years, it's probably been I had an amazing 1 hour long conversation with the owner of Footprints, Bobby. I think he's incredible as well. We've never met, but he took a whole hour out of his time to talk to me on the phone one day. And I just thought that was so amazing because he didn't really know me, you know, and he gave me some incredible advice. And so I would say that I haven't really been, I will be honest, I haven't really been embraced by the culinary industry in that way, to really have a chef mentor. I think that there are challenges in every industry, right? Like there's challenges in the fashion industry, there's challenges in the food industry. And in the food industry, the challenge is if you didn't go to school, why am I even talking to you? It's sad, but it's real. And so, there are so many opportunities that I've been given to be in rooms, but unfortunately, without there being that level of education, I'm just not important enough to bond with. But I will say I will still continue to walk into those rooms, and I will connect with those individuals because I am a force to be reckoned with, and I do know that. And what I am doing in this industry is unique, special, and needed. And I'm just waiting for my opportunity to really showcase all that I can do, because at the base of it all, I'm a creative. And I create things out of nothing. And I've always been able to do that. And so for me, you know, their acceptance of me is not really important. It's my skin in the game, as I said before, and the presence that I hold within and the space that I carve out for myself.
I know somebody was blessed by that, because a lot of times we're gonna go into places and spaces where, and interesting enough, sometimes the people best suited to solve industry problems are people who are not from the industry.
That part.
So
That
for,
part.
for all our listeners and students who sometimes think they're not the right people for the industry because they may not have the credentials or the experiences, sometimes you are the most equipped person for an industry because you're not jaded by the industry. You have a different set of eyes. So I hope that that share from Latisha encourage someone to know that you may not have all the credentials for a particular industry, and you could still be an asset and add value to it.
Yeah,
Um,
like I will tell you guys, just to piggyback off of that, I've had, one of the things that has been probably the most challenging for me is building a team of people that do have experience, that believe in my vision and support me. And I've had a lot of ego, right? Because this industry, like many other, there's a lot of ego. I don't cook from that energy. So I don't really, that's not the space that I'm in. But I've had people just look at me because I do things unconventionally. I do. I'm a retailer. I know how to pivot. I'm a multitasker. I'm a creative. So there's a lot of different things that I've done in my life that give me the experience level to look at something in a different way and approach it in a different way. And because some people have gone to school and they've learned to do things one particular way, and if they can't do it that particular way, they're lost, right? But they judge, right? And so I've always kind of operated where I'm just like, okay, I'm willing to learn from any and everybody. But one thing I can't really handle is the judgment of someone else just because you have one way of doing something and I have multiple. And because I have multiple, I've been able to build and grow a business that you haven't been able to do. So you're not really in a position to judge, yet you do, right? And so you got to really understand how to navigate in those situations, because when you have different perspective, that's your strength, right? When you have a perspective that's different from someone else, but you arrive at the same goal, and maybe your way is more productive, maybe your way is more cost effective, maybe your way motivates people in a different way, or it tastes better, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, it fits better if it's fashion, or the fabrication was worked better from a production standpoint in terms of cost, right? There's always going to be a win, and you have to really be able to decipher where the win is and not be bogged down by somebody's or intimidated by somebody's experience.
This can go on. Like we got solid, we got an official 10 minutes, but the gems you are dropping, and this is the purpose of Lunch and Learns. This is in-depth, very candid conversation in a way that you may not hear it from real people who live in your neighborhood, who are local. The next question, thank you for that, Latisha. Next question is, thank you for sharing your time and experiences. I want to ask a question about something you mentioned regarding the changes in the business environment that you have witnessed, especially with regards to technology. I was wondering if you can reflect on how technology has impacted your business,
Mm.
and if there's anything that could make your journey life easier as a CEO.
Absolutely. So Gary and I were just having this conversation before this all started. Technology is hard for me. I'm 50 years old. I didn't grow up with technology. Like I grew up. What did Gary? You're not even my age. I can't even ask you.
I'm
But
a little. I have an old soul though. I have an old.
I mean, we
So
had two-way pagers and Motorola
I,
phones. And,
I was there for it.
the beginning, right? And so COVID was that defining moment for me because COVID took us into a space where we didn't know what we didn't know, right? About what was going on in the world. And as a business owner, whew, you had to make everything simplified, and you had to lean on technology. There was no other way to do business because you couldn't touch people, right? And everyone was afraid. And so COVID was really that moment where I was like, okay, we got to figure this out. And I had to really sit and strategize and teach myself certain things, to be able to do business in that landscape. Or I would have closed like everyone else during COVID, but instead we thrived. Um, and I would say again, I'm a daily student. I'm literally going to sit today and go through some things on my website, to make my customers' experience better. But technology for me can be overwhelming, because a lot of times it requires an enormous amount of time to get it right. And as a business owner, you don't always have that time. And so you put things off, right? And by putting them off, they only grow to become mountains of things that you have to tackle in the future. Um, I'm still working through that because I'm still a one woman show. As far as, I don't have partners. And uh, right now, I would say my strategy is carving out admin time every day to be able to tackle the challenges that I have within my business that are dependent on the technology. But then taking that, whatever change I made or whatever lesson I learned, and teaching my staff to make sure that we are all on the same level. I have a very diverse staff from all different parts of the world. They all vary in age from 20s to 40s to 60s. And so obviously the way that we learn and receive information is all different, right? And so making sure that whatever it is I learn, I am doing them the due diligence by making sure I teach. And so that's kind of how I'm dealing with the technology challenge.
And it's so potent that you stated this. Like years ago, I had a chance to meet Roscoe Brown. Roscoe Brown was the last living Tuskegee Airman, right? He was the last living, fought in World War II. And I remember I met him, and he was in his 80s at the time. And he said, I was like, I gotta ask him something. I got history in front of me. I gotta ask him something. And I never forget his words. He's passed on since. And he said, "Do not allow technology to get ahead of you."
Mm.
And I never shook that. I'm not an early adopter to technology. I'm blessed to be on a campus where I have so many students who can keep me abreast of all the newest technologies. When what was it? When Chat GPT first came out, my students were telling me about it, so I'm blessed to be in that position. But I never forget him saying, "Do not allow technology to get ahead of you."
Mm.
And I
That's
think,
profound.
yeah, I never could shake that feeling. Because it was such a gem because we know people who, who use typewriters at one point in their life, and that was replaced by Microsoft Word. And
I was an avid typer. You
right,
said, "That's it."
right,
60 words a minute. Yes,
right.
sir.
So, right, the typewriter was a thing, but what happened when Microsoft Word? What happened to
Yeah.
all the people who said, "I'm not learning Microsoft Word. I'm not doing it. I use a typewriter." There's no that typewriter. Even if you wanted to use it, you can't. And
Can't even
Microsoft
find
Word,
a typewriter
you can't
now.
even,
Yeah.
so like that whole concept about technology and embracing it and making time for it. I thank you for sharing that, and also being honest about the challenges and the time commitments that is required to learn it, right?
Mhm.
Um, Another question. Do you think formal education, which emphasizes the recognition of risks, prevents people from going into business?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Um, again, that's why I said you really have to be convicted in your own dream, right? And not let other things define how you achieve that goal. Because, you know, I was the first person, I have a huge family. I was the first person to go to college, right? And graduate. And I did that for me. Like, yes, I can say, that's amazing. I am whatever, but at the end of the day, I did it for me first. And, it really is a huge part of who I am today. Because if I didn't go to college, I don't know what my life would have been. But I think a lot of times people are intimidated. Like I'm 50 and I'm thinking about going back to school just to acquire certain skills, just to stay abreast of technology, just to be able to really put myself in an environment. Like I said, I'm a student. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in what we know. And we allow what we don't know to intimidate us. And, if you're not open to learning every day, even as an adult, because we all can learn something every day, if you're not open to that, you're going to put yourself in a box, right? Because there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to really navigate yourself in this world. The world is moving at such a fast pace that we have to constantly be open to learning, constantly seeking new information, whether we apply it in our personal lives or in our businesses. It is key in our survival, especially in our community.
So good. So good. And I never asked you that question offline about college and things like that. But the fact that here at the Field Center, we are a center of entrepreneurship that exists on a college campus.
Which I
So
think is
there's no,
amazing. I didn't
so there's
have that. This is great.
right. So
Yes,
there's no way we can be anti-college. We're on a college campus. And,
absolutely.
and I think our goal is how do we help students to understand that in the world of what it seems like fast entrepreneurs and overnight successes, to hear you as someone who's currently an entrepreneur who has a level of success and has multiple levels of success, still saying that I am even willing to go back to school when sometimes I don't know if our students understand the value of what they're in now. So like I appreciate you doubling down on it that we're never, never too old to go back.
No,
And the necessity of school, right? Especially for those of us who, and I can speak to this, I didn't have anyone in my family that I can turn to for systems and structures of how to run a business. But you know where I learned the beginnings of those systems and structures? At Baruch College as an undergrad
mhm,
student.
mhm.
So I want to thank you for that. I didn't even know you was gonna say that, but thank you for in using your story to confirm the importance of how you can marry the formal with the experiential learning of entrepreneurship. Like I really
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Like I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Really, I really do. Because sometimes, we're on a college campus all the time and we stay aware of what's happening in the world, right? So we live in a world where you can be an influencer and make millions of dollars, right? And that is a position to hold that didn't exist 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years
Absolutely.
ago. There was
Hmm.
people were influencers, but it wasn't a name and it wasn't an occupation.
Right.
Right? It was just something you just were. You were a
Right.
tastemaker. People looked at, but you didn't have an official title of influencer that you can monetize. And
Right.
as amazing as that is and how astounding that is, and it speaks to where we are, I just want students and those listening who may be thinking about going back to school themselves that do not devalue or overlook the value of a formal education.
Hmm.
All
Because
right.
you actually possess more power when you have both. It, it's
Oh,
it, it's it's the keys, right? It really is. And I don't really understand the influencer thing. Like I understand it, but I think it has a ceiling. I do. Just like everything runs its course, there comes a time where there'll be something else, right? And so, how do you prepare yourself for that something else if you do not have the foundation of an education, right? Because the education is really teaching you how to think, how to be analytical, how to apply all of these things that you learn in school into the real world. And then those experiences compounded with that is how you monetize, right? And build. And so to me, the two can never be disconnected.
Wow. That is a great way to close because we're literally at 1:30
I
and we could
love it.
probably go we literally at 1:30. So we're like, and we want to respect everybody's time. So thank you, Latisha, for being with us today. We
Thank
are
you.
super, super grateful for having you. Thank you guys for participating with us today. Please be on the lookout with a follow-up email with today's recording. And we're going to do our next Lunch and Learn on March 27th. And it's going to be about personal branding. It's also going to be on Zoom as well. You can find the link on our IG page, on our LinkedIn. You'll probably get a constant contact email, and you can register for that event as well. So thank you and goodbye.